It happened on a summer day in a small New England town, inside a home known for wealth and comfort. That morning, a woman named Abby was sprawled out in a bedroom, being hacked to death with a hatchet. Blow after blow rained down with stunning brutality until her body was in ribbons. Sometime later, a man named Andrew entered the house. He had no idea his wife was lying in bloody pieces upstairs. He went to the living room couch, plopped down, and stayed there. The killer got him too. Hit him at least 10 times with the hatchet. The attack was so vicious. Andrew was unrecognizable. His face was pulverized. The couple's last name was Borden. They lived and died in Fall River, Massachusetts in 1892. Everyone thought their 32-year-old daughter Lizzie had killed them. After that, Lizzie's name was on the lips of everyone for miles. When she went to trial, the whole country ravaged the papers, tantalized by the horror of it all. Kids even made rhymes about it.
Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41.
Yeah, the public consumed this tragedy like it was entertainment. And listen, Lizzie ended up being acquitted, as in, not guilty, but still, people couldn't stop talking about her. I mean, I'm talking about her now, over 100 years later. Which brings me to my point. I just got an envelope in the mail. The return address is what got me thinking about all this. It says, the Lizzie Borden House, Fall River, Massachusetts. There's no name, no indication who sent it or why. It's just the beginning of a murky puzzle that someone, somewhere, wants me to solve. The reason I think that is because inside the package, there's a flash drive. I haven't used one in years. I figured I could see what's on it, with all you listening right now. All right? Here we go. I'm sticking the drive into my laptop. Okay. A folder just popped up. It's got a sound file in it. Let's open it. Whoa. You're listening to Run, Fool. I'm Rodney Barnes, and this is episode 50, The Lizzie Borden House. That scream you just heard, that was the end of a recording. I know that because I just listened to the whole thing from the beginning. And like you probably guessed, it doesn't end well. That wail wasn't 'cause of some stubbed toe. The person that made it, I'll tell you what was on the file, what led to that scream. But just know, it wasn't pretty. The drive belonged to a man, Harry. He was a reporter. He listed some nice credentials at the top of the recording. That's not important. Here's what you need to know. Harry was desperate to solve one of the most famous cold cases in the country. If Lizzie Borden had killed her dad and stepmother, Andrew and Abby Borden, I told you about them. I also said Lizzie was acquitted at the trial. But in the court of public opinion, Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Yeah, everyone thought she was guilty, and Harry needed to know for sure. You might want to know why Harry cared so much. Well, Harry was from Massachusetts. Lizzie was a local legend. He'd grown up singing that rhyme, so it was nostalgic for him. But the bigger reason, Harry wasn't just any reporter. He was a failed reporter. He'd been laid off from a major newspaper 2 years ago. He'd gotten by on freelance gigs. But those had dried up too. This was his career Hail Mary. He was going to solve the case and turn it into a podcast. Lizzie Borden's story was going to save his career. That's where he was when the recording kicked on, Fall River. And just to be clear, once that recorder turned on, it never went off. Harry narrated basically everything he was doing from this point on. All the stuff I'm about to tell you. It's all the stuff Harry said. Anyway, it was dusk. He was walking up the cement steps of an olive green home. 3 stories, old and stoic. The kind of place that seemed shadowy even in daylight, but especially at dusk. It was the Lizzie Borden House, where Abby and Andrew were hacked to bits. Now it was a cozy little bed and breakfast. Some leaves floated around him as he approached. Red, orange, fall confetti. It was spooky season. Halloween was only days away. There were a few fake cobwebs on the inn's door, a big carved pumpkin on the steps, but not much else. This house didn't need any scary crap on the outside. It had plenty of horror on the inside. Harry readjusted his backpack. It was heavy, full of clothes, notebooks, and equipment. He'd booked the whole house for a week. It cost him the rest of his savings, but it'd be worth it. This way he'd have the time and space to explore the home secrets. He took a breath, then opened the door. It creaked as it swung inward. All the lights were on, which made Harry squint, but his eyes didn't get the chance to adjust, because the decor made him squint even more. It was just patterns everywhere. An assault of flowers, colors, and shapes. On the walls, the carpet, the furnishings. Everything had a different print. I've seen pictures online, and let me tell you, Grandma would have loved it. She never shied away from a loud design. It made Harry dizzy, though. As he stepped inside, he had to reach out to steady himself on the staircase banister. The steps twisted up to the floor above. A doorway off the foyer led into a dining room. Another opened up in the living space with a fireplace. That room, the living room, it's where Lizzie's father took his final breath. The angry thud of boots made Harry jump. A woman in her 60s stormed down the stairs. She introduced herself as Maura. She'd been waiting. Before he could respond, she launched into the rules of the house. No smoking, quiet hours start at 10. You know, logistics. Harry nodded, but as soon as he had the chance, he held out his recorder and asked her about the murders. Moira didn't like that. Her gaze darkened, and she told Harry off. Said she was sick of people exploiting the past. Human beings died. There Harry was, trying to turn their pain into a thriller. Shame on him. She threw him the key, said she'd be back in the morning to put breakfast out. Then she left. The front door slammed shut. Harry winced. That had technically been his first interview, and it didn't go great. He took a breath, tried to shake it off. He slowly spun in a circle, checking out his surroundings. In Moira's aftermath, the house felt really quiet. The sun had set outside, and the shadowy corners of the room seemed thick. A loud creak suddenly echoed from upstairs. Harry froze. He recognized that kind of sound. It was a footstep, body weight stepping on wood. But no other noises came after that. Must have been the house settling. Harry wasn't going to let Moira or the house scare him off. He had a job to do, so he got to exploring. He spoke into his recorder as he walked around the place. Noting how the floorboards creaked, the table lamps cast a glow over antique furniture. He moved up the staircase to the second-floor landing, then went into a bedroom. Harry's boots sank into the rose-patterned carpet. There was a large wooden bed, more loud wallpaper. He knew this room. He'd studied the floor plans. Abby Borden was killed here. 19 hits, a fair amount of blows. He wondered if she saw her attacker. There was another creak from the corner of the room. The same sound he'd heard earlier, a footstep on wood. The shadows around the lamplight were dark, so it took him a moment to realize there was a person standing there. A figure in the darkness. They were very still. So still, they didn't look real. That's because they weren't. It was a mannequin, dressed in old-timey clothes. Harry inspected it. The thing looked antique. Maybe it was an original piece used to make the Bordens' dresses. If it was an original, he knew more about what happened there than anyone else. Harry held up his recorder and jokingly asked the mannequin, "What were you doing the morning of August 4th, 1892? Harry chuckled, but then he heard something, a faint, high-pitched whisper, and he was sure it came from the mannequin. It said, "I was dying."
The holiday season is just around the corner, and we're all looking for ways to spend and stress less. HelloFresh makes mealtime nearly hassle-free with delicious home-delivered, chef-crafted recipes that come together quick and are less expensive than takeout. Whether you're craving hearty comfort food, trying to please picky eaters, or looking for a calorie-smart meal plan, HelloFresh has all those options and more available on a rotating menu of 50 recipes to choose from every week. I have a really busy schedule, and I'm doing my best not to go to some fast food place and further deteriorate my health due to laziness and poor scheduling. But you know what actually has me in a good place right now? HelloFresh. Man, I can go in the refrigerator and get something really quick, and I'm good. I can keep my well-being. And you know who I blame for all of this? HelloFresh. My friends at HelloFresh. Man, they've helped my health and well-being, and they can help yours too. Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/freefool. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/freefool. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
The all-new FanDuel Sportsbook and Casino is bringing you more action than ever. Want more ways to follow your faves? Check out our new player prop tracking with real-time notifications. Or how about more ways to customize your casino page with our new favorite and recently played games tabs? And to top it all off, quick and secure withdrawals. Get more everything with FanDuel Sportsbook and Casino. Gambling problem? Call 1-866-531-2600. Visit connectsontario.ca.
I wouldn't have blamed Harry if he screamed or ran from the room. I mean, he just asked a mannequin a question, and it responded. But that was absurd. So Harry just gaped at the waxy face, then looked at his recorder. His hand shook. If that had really happened, it'd be on the tape. Here's the thing. Harry knew there were stories about this place, ghosts of the Bordens and all that. Of course there were. Where there's horror and death, there are rumors of unfinished business. But Harry didn't believe in that stuff. The way he saw it, the only way the dead could talk was through the clues they left behind while they were living. All's that to say, Harry wasn't going to listen to that tape. He didn't want to mess with his time or sanity. It was easier to decide that voice was in his head than learn it wasn't. Even so, he'd had enough of his little tour. He was ready to go dig around the bowels of the house. Yeah, he was headed to the basement. Moments later, he stood at the cellar door. It had a big sign on it. "Warning, Harry, staff entrance only." He opened it anyway, reached for the light switch. It didn't work. The light behind him spilled onto the stairs below. He looked at his shadow on the steps. It was elongated and out of proportion. Looked kinda like a clown. Harry took out his cell. He wasn't about to let a little darkness get in the way of his investigation. He turned the phone light on and waved it around as he moved down the steps. Each let out a creak of protest under his weight, like screams, a chorus of them, belting out a tragic ballad as he walked into the gloomy basement. Soon he reached the bottom. Part of the space was unfinished, dingy and stone. It ran the whole distance of the house, with piles of old furniture here and there. 2 doors on his left were ajar, leading to extra bedrooms. He clipped the recorder to his shirt, then got to work, rifling through old cabinets, looking under dusty couch cushions. He didn't find anything, just house trash from whoever had lived there through the years. Old brochures, broken lamps, you know the deal. It felt oddly personal. He was in the guts of a house, raking over items someone had wanted to keep. Seems to me there was a metaphor in that, not that Harry noticed. At some point he took a break in the old armchair. He wasn't done looking, he just needed to reassess and think of another place to search. So he went over the facts of the case, hoping it would spark something. Harry talked a lot about the murders here, about details that sounded important, like the timeline, the fact that Lizzie inherited money. She hated her stepmother. There was religious tension in the community. Context is important, but you can look the case up. For our purposes, focus on Harry and the dark, damp basement he was sitting in. He eventually decided to call it. He was tired and had the whole week to look around. But when he stood up, he knocked the chair with his leg. It moved. Something deep inside of it rattled. Now, Harry had been hearing creaks and sounds all night, so he thought it was his mind again, playing tricks. He pushed the chair with his foot. It moved and rattled. Harry grabbed the seat cushion. It was threadbare and very loose. All he had to do was jiggle it a little and it came off. Underneath it, carved in the chair's wooden seat, was a hole. In that hole was a notebook. It was aged and crusty. Its edges were curled and yellowing. A hidden notebook in an old chair. It wasn't nothing. Harry grabbed it. Then, someone grabbed him. Two hands squeezed Harry's shoulders, nails dug into his skin. He screamed and whipped around. There was nothing behind him. His heart thundered. His head spun. He touched a spot on his shoulder where he'd felt the grip. It tingled. Someone had definitely grabbed him, which meant, yeah, Harry was getting a bad feeling. He didn't have the house to himself after all. That's the kind of realization that makes logic fly out the window. My grandma used to call it fear fog. When your body reacts, your senses fire, but you can't think. That's what it seemed like Harry was going through, because all he could do was say, he needed the light. He needed light. He repeated that under his breath as he shot up the stairs into the blissful, well-lit home. He slammed the basement door, moved into the kitchen, and let his jelly legs take a break. He collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table. Then he remembered the notebook. It was still in his hands, and he was scared, sure, but he was deeply curious, too. So, he opened it. The decrepit pages were thin and hard to read. Still, he could make out a few names. Abby. Daddy. His breath caught. Lizzie wrote this. He was sure of it. Even though Harry had fantasized about finding something like this, he didn't think he actually would. So he was stunned just as he was thrilled. This was it, you know. He'd set out to find the answer to the Borden murders. And now it was right here in front of him. That breakthrough he needed to save his career. He was holding it in his hands. He fumbled with the recorder on his shirt. Then he began to read Lizzie's personal thoughts out loud. He didn't get far, though, because the lights went out. Soon as they did, Harry felt something strange. A deep coldness at his back, like someone put an ice pack on his spine. He looked over his shoulder. A dark smear of black stood behind him. It was a person. They lifted a hand, fingers spread wide, reaching towards the journal in Harry's hands. Harry panicked, and he didn't say this, but I'd venture a guess. His panic wasn't fear over a sinister, mysterious figure. It was because of the journal. He really didn't want them to have it. For all the reasons you know, his career, his curiosity, and he discovered this thing, right or wrong. He seemed to feel like he had some kind of claim to it. So, Harry ran. He tore out of the room, heading for the front door. But as he passed through the living room, his foot caught on the lip of a paisley rug. He pitched forward, smashing into the couch. The soft cushions broke his fall. but they consumed him too. He pushed at them, trying to sit up. The figure stood over him, before the couch. He couldn't see their face, but he could tell they wore a dress. Skirt fabric swished, and as they raised their arms into the air, that's when he saw it. In their grip was a sharp, lethal hatchet. Harry never thought he'd die this way. He didn't know how he thought he'd die, but being hacked to bits by a shadowy psycho wasn't on the bingo card. Even so, he watched the hatchet come down, straight into his chest, and he knew his time had come. The blade slammed into him. The pain was so searing, he couldn't even feel it. The figure swung the hatchet again, and again, and again. Each time Harry felt the force of the hit, he knew the devastating absence of pain meant he was beyond it. He closed his eyes and waited for the darkness to take him. But it didn't. He could still hear things. The creak of the house as it settled, the old clock ticking, his own ragged breath. Harry's hands touched his chest, expecting to find a pile of mush and ooze where his ribcage was. But his shirt was intact. So was his skin. Nothing, and I mean nothing, was damaged. He sat up. The figure still stood beside the couch, but the moonlight from the room's window had shifted. Now, Harry could see her face. 'Cause yeah, it was a her. Hollow cheeks, dark, angry eyes. He'd seen this face before, looking at him from the pages of countless newspaper articles he'd read. It was Lizzie Borden. Harry crawled away from her, but his hand sank into something, wet and warm and thick. He looked next to him and gagged. It was a man in a suit, slumped over on the couch, his face hacked to bits. But Harry knew who it was. Andrew, Lizzie's dad. Harry barely recognized the blood-curdling scream that erupted from his own throat, and he barely felt his body scramble off the couch. His legs carried him on instinct to the foyer. He was almost at the door when he realized he left the journal on the couch. He stopped. That was the thing. Harry, he didn't want to leave that journal. It was an intimate, career-making piece of evidence. He was sure it held the key to solving the murders. The very thing that would save his crappy life was in the other room, with only a dark house and a bloodthirsty ghost standing in his way. That's why Harry went back into that house, through the foyer, to the living room. It was empty. No Lizzie, no corpse. But the journal was still there. Harry grabbed it and ran back to the front door. The moonlight didn't reach there, so the entire foyer was dark. He took out his phone light again. Its beam cut through the murk and illuminated a face. It was violently pale, with wide, bloodshot eyes and a gaping mouth that hung open like a rotting gash. Lizzie. She stood at the door. Her arms were stretched out protectively, blocking the exit. Then she lunged. Harry lurched to his left, towards the stairwell. He shot up the steps, desperate to get away from the beast that blocked the door. The landing upstairs was deserted. Then, a high-pitched, delirious laugh echoed through the home. It came from the guest bedroom, the one with the mannequin, where Abby Borden was killed. The laugh was so cold, he could feel it in his bones. Before he could flee, the bedroom door slowly opened. Harry couldn't help it. With a shaking hand, he lifted his phone light and peered inside. There was a body next to the bed. It was a woman, lying in a pool of blood. She wasn't moving. Her face was tilted towards Harry, so he could see her open eyes. Her mouth was twisted in shock, frozen forever during the worst moment of her entire life. Harry's whole body seized. He felt wretched because of the gore, sure, but also he was suddenly aware that this was a person. She had died. He was used to reading about the Bordens like characters in a story, But seeing her like that, on the floor, they were humans, brutalized and discarded. Harry's brow dripped with sweat. The journal was slick in his hands. He staggered to the stairs, away from the body. But someone stood in his path. Lizzie was at the top of the stairs, no hatchet in sight. It was just her. Harry's phone light shone into her horrifying face. Her expression was stony. Her eyes glinted with absolute menace as she stared at the journal in his hand. Then she sprang forward and tore it from his grip. You're not gonna like this part. But Harry was pissed, because despite how freaked out he was still dying to solve this mystery. Now he'd lost the thing that could do it. That's when it occurred to him. He still had his recorder running. And there he was, standing in front of the only person who could tell him what had happened that day. He didn't need to read her innermost thoughts. He could just ask her. He fumbled for the recorder, tore it off his shirt, and held it out. His hand shook, so did his voice, but he managed to croak out a question. Lizzie, what happened the day of the murders? Lizzie was quiet for a long, long time. Harry watched her clutch the journal to her chest, protective, almost vulnerable. It made him feel bad. He guessed he wouldn't want someone reading his innermost thoughts, not even when he was dead. Then she looked up at him, her lips parted. Hope swelled in his chest as he waited for her to speak. When she did, her words were heavy. None of your business. Then she shoved him. Unfortunately, Harry hadn't realized how close he was to the railing. Losing his balance wasn't just bad. It was fatal. He dropped like a brick from the second floor. His body plunged to the foyer, smashing into a table by the base of the stairs. The wood splintered under him. It took him a second to realize he couldn't move. His legs were dead weight. So were his arms. He lifted his neck up just enough to see the damage. It wasn't good. A massive shard had found its way into Harry's stomach. He was skewered. Blood pooled around the wound. Once he saw that, the pain washed over him, agonizing and disorienting. He coughed, feeling the metallic taste of blood roar up his throat, into his mouth. It dribbled down his chin, flowing onto his neck. Harry was dying, and he knew it. You never know what you're going to think about during your last moments. In my case, I've always hoped it'll be something interesting or profound. Harry's last thoughts were, that damn nursery rhyme. It ran through his head like a track star doing laps. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. It made his head spin. It also made him think about the rhyme and what it meant. See, he was realizing how messed up it all was, that someone made a song out of a tragedy. It was no better than what he'd done, trying to exploit someone's death to enhance his life. He didn't know if Lizzie was a killer. No one did. That wasn't the point. Incredibly, he'd managed to hold on to his recorder during the fall. He spoke into it. With a halting, shaky voice, he explained he didn't understand it before, but now he was dying, and it all made sense. See, the only tale he really had the right to sing about, write about, talk about, was his own. So that's what he did. He talked about himself, where he came from, how much of a failure he'd felt like these last few years. All that. As he stammered into his recorder, he saw Lizzie. She stood on the stairs watching him, listening with a smile, entertained by his tragedy, just as he'd been by hers. When he finished, a brutal wave of pain ripped through him. He released a bone-chilling scream, the same one from the beginning of all this, when I first played the recording. It was raw, filled with pain and terror. not just because of his injuries, because of shame and regret at himself and at all the others like him. Then, his scream died to a whimper. Soon it stopped. It got too quiet then. A heavy, dense kind of silence. It meant the absence of something. In this case, it was the absence of life. That was the end. I don't know what happened to Harry. I don't know who sent this drive to me. There's so much I don't know. For once, I don't think I care. Because I'm thinking that sometimes seeking out the answer to something for your own curiosity or entertainment isn't right. See, Harry's story reminded me that there's a risk in telling stories. Sometimes it hurts the people they're about. Makes me feel guilty, actually. Each episode of Run Fool is your Tuesday entertainment. But for the real people who endured those horrors, that was the worst day of their lives. Sometimes it's the last day. And here's the thing. The dead can't speak for themselves. They can't give me their permission. Which gets me thinking, am I any better than Harry? Are any of us? Run Fool is a production of Ballen Studios, Campside Media, and At Will Media. It is hosted and executive produced by me, Rodney Barnes. This episode was written by Kate Murdoch and produced by Abakar Adan and Lane Rose. Editing by Abakar Adan. Sound director, designer, and mixer is Kevin Seaman. Coordinating producer is Avery Siegel. And artwork by Jessica Clarkston-Kiner. Special thanks to Sequoia Thomas. Production support by Jeremy Bone and Cole Lacasio. Special thanks to our operations team, Doug Slaywin, Ashley Warren, Sabina Mara, and Destiny Dingle. Executive producers at Ballen Studios are MrBallen, Nick Witters, and Zach Levitt. Executive producer at Will Media is Will Malnati. Executive producers at Campside Media are Matt Scher, Josh Dean, Vanessa Gregoriadis, and Adam Hoff. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.